just about to start. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jane Bryan, and I'm the Director of Alumni Affairs here at Bard, and I'm also from the class of 1989. Let me be the first of many people this weekend, to welcome everyone watching at home to our very first virtual commencement ceremonies and alumni affairs. I just wanted to let everybody know there is a full program that you can download on the website if you want to follow along. And I want to be the first here to congratulate all the people who we're going to be giving awards to tonight. They really represent the best of our alumni. The Bardian Awards for our amazing faculty, and also for local people who've done amazing community work. And I am going to turn the mic over virtually to my close friend and the president of the Bard College Alumni Association Board of Governors, Casey Sirota, from the class of 2004. Welcome, Casey.
Hello, and welcome to the Bard College Awards. I'm Casey Sirota, president of the Bard College Alumni Association Board of Governors. This awards ceremony is hosted by the Board of Governors. The awardees are nominated and chosen by the board as the elected representation of the Bard College Alumni Association, and led by our own nominations committee, headed by Zubeida Ula Ellenberg, class of 1997. This ceremony was to take place in a different time and a different place. We would have been meeting physically together on a beautiful late spring day, the last Friday in May, in the inspiring concert hall of the Fisher Center for the Performing Arts. However, the world has changed with a global pandemic and our country's leadership failing to control its wide-ranging spread. Thus, we find ourselves tuning in from home to see the world and visit with friends and family we would have seen in real life. Today, I am speaking to you from my home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Today, we celebrate some of the best and brightest of our alumni community. We also warmly welcome our distinguished guests, whom we will be honoring. There have been a lot of changes in the last few months. There has been a civil unrest spurred by the brutality of racist police violence and murders. We've seen calls for change, statues removed, resignations, bravery in protest, and humility in listening. Bard has not been without its controversies in this moment, and our alumni have called for strong action in support of diversity, inclusion, and support of current students. We see hope in these calls, and in the energy, action, and fortitude of our most recent graduates, and those starting a challenging academic year, whether as new first years, as seniors preparing their projects, sophomores looking to moderate, or juniors looking ahead. For many of us watching online today, this might be the first time you've joined us for the Bard College Awards. We would love to have you join us next year at the Fisher Center in person. It's a lovely event, and we learn so much about the great successes Bardians go on to achieve in the world and the connections we make. My congratulations to all of our alumni who plan to celebrate their reunions this year. Thank you for all of the ways you support Bard, and in particular for your class gifts. Mark your calendars for next May, when we can all celebrate together in Annandale with the reunion classes of 2021. I look forward to welcoming you back then. Bard is the place where I truly learned to think for myself, to analyze, to research, and to stand up for what's right. The awardees we recognize here today embody the spirit of this college and our mission of being rooted in social justice. When I talk about Bard out in the world, I do so with great pride. I tell people that I loved my college experience at a small liberal arts college on the Hudson River, but that I stay active with the community because of the people who strive to make meaningful impacts on the world. We are so fortunate to call Bard our alma mater, when that also means the place that is rethinking secondary education, that is innovative in prison reform and education in incarceration, and that has world-spanning programming for liberal arts in places where that practice doesn't exist or cannot thrive on its own. Today's ceremony recognizes a number of alumni and staff and friends of the college who have done remarkable things. Our highest award today goes to Barbara Grossman, class of 1973, who's been a longtime trustee of the college. We recognize two alumna from my era at the college, Juliet Morrison, class of 2003 in public health, and the extraordinary artist of various assignments, class of 2005. Matt Taibi, class of 1992, and Nicholas Acienzo are receiving our awards for public service. Carolyn Forché is recipient of this year's Mary McCarthy Award. This summer, I read her memoir of her time just before the Civil War in El Salvador. It was a harrowing story, and I recommend everyone check it out. And of course, Bard could not be Bard without the incredible staff and faculty of the college. They are the reasons the college is what it is and keep it running creatively, responsibly, and ethically. Our Bardian Award goes to retiring faculty and staff, this year represented by Peggy Ahwesh, Matthew Deedy, Bonnie Marcus, and Richard Teitelbaum. I want to thank Brandon Weber, class of 1997, the previous president of the Board of Governors, and alumni trustee for assisting me today by presenting these awards in person in Annandale. Thank you for tuning in to help us celebrate our honorees. I return you now to Annandale.
Thank you very much, Casey. It's really nice to see you here from Albuquerque. I now have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to the president of the college, Leon Botstein.
Thank you, Jane. I want to say that we are very grateful to everyone who has come here. I notice trustees and members of the faculty who have come into this commencement tent to recreate, if you will, the award ceremony that Casey described that usually takes place on the Friday before commencement. And I want to thank, you don't see it on the video, but I do want to thank all the staff of Buildings and Grounds, of Environmental Services, of the Development and Alumni offices, every administrator here on campus, and all the technical people in the back supporting this effort. This has been very difficult to organize, and it has taken incredible loyalty. If Bard has come this far, it's because of the human resources and the loyalty that staff and faculty have shown this college. This is more than a job to the people I see in front of me, whom you probably can see on your camera, and it is owing to their service beyond the call of duty and beyond their paycheck that has actually kept the college going and actually given it hope for the future. So I want all of you who are watching this to realize this is a labor of love. And I want to congratulate all the award recipients and their sponsors for making this virtual event possible. Semi-virtual, because we're all here in real time. The strange thing about wearing a mask is that you never see a smile. There are reasons that crooks, robbers, and bad people wear masks because they want to conceal their identities. And being in a university or a college, and especially Bard, it's the exact opposite. It's about foregrounding the identity and fashioning who we are. So there's a loss, and that loss is symbolic of the loss of what real learning and real study is about. If there's one silver lining to this pandemic, it is the recognition that there is no technological fix to education, certainly not higher education, and certainly not elementary and secondary education. What has distinguished the Bard High School early colleges is that when the pandemic hit, the quality of what we were able to provide in a public system to 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th graders was substantially higher, so much so that the cities of Washington and Baltimore are asking us to help them provide for all 11th and 12th graders in the period of time in which the schools will be closed, a much higher level of content and quality. But even at the very highest level, and our faculty adapted in March to online instruction with remarkable ingenuity and imagination in every single field, from the laboratory sciences to the studio arts. But there's no surrogate. We succeeded in the spring because we knew our students, so the transfer to online was possible. But there is no techno-utopia, ladies and gentlemen, for what Bard does or any serious place of learning does. It facilitates, technology does facilitate communication, and owing to the work of Jonathan Becker and his team and the newly created Open Society University Network, we're able to perfect the use of technology and link students and faculty to colleagues all over the world. There are wonders with technology, but they're at the margins of the core experience, which is why I'm pleased to report that we actually are back in business. We have on the campus here a terrifically wonderful and large entering class, and the returning students are on their way back. That won't make this year easier because we have to rely, which is why I'm wearing a mask, on the self-control and restraint, which is hard for anyone, but particularly notoriously and legendarily hard for the traditional college population, to observe things which are ultimately anathema to the human experience we want to underscore, and that is intimacy in the best sense, close contact, physical contact. Those of us in the arts, social distancing is the death of what we do. And so we have to share with them and lead them in observing the regulations and the rules which keep ourselves and everyone else safe. And when the time comes, I hope sooner rather than later, we need to pioneer in making sure that the majority of our citizens take a properly developed and safe vaccine. This will be ultimately over. But unlike many rich institutions, the award ceremony is in a way a family event in which we talk among ourselves as people who work at Bard, and people who live at Bard, and people who graduate at Bard. And we talk about the institution and its future and its past. Traditionally, I talk a little bit about the state of the college, and the most important thing to say is that we broke even last year, owing to the generosity of a couple of very crucial donors. I want to congratulate and thank the chair of our board, Jim Chambers, from class of '81, who will join us this afternoon, remotely but on campus, that we were able to break even. But we have a very challenging year, and that challenging year is because to operate under COVID will cost us about $16 million more than we usually spend. Look at all the masks, all the equipment, all the cleaning, all the extra labor, the new protocols for making sure that bathrooms, offices, classrooms are actually safe. This is an enormous burden for all the virtues of the way New York State has been governed in terms of the pandemic. Classic to our system of government, we're told what we must do, but no one helps us pay for it. So we have to observe the right thing, but how are we going to pay for it? We can't pass it on to the consumer. In fact, of the $16 million that we have to spend more this year, 10 of it is in extra financial aid. There's an economic catastrophe out there. There's a rapid rise in unemployment. 25% of our student body comes from the lowest quarter of the economic income distribution. And we also have 70% of our student body receiving financial aid from the college. And this college is not rich, which is a tremendous virtue. We have to survive through this pandemic and economic crisis the way ordinary people do. We don't have the privileges of the very wealthy who can leave the city and hole up in some bucolic neighborhood and wait it out. We can't do what Princeton does, we can't do what Harvard does, we can't do what Yale does, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because we're not banks. We're not private equity funds and universities and colleges second. The money that we get from you and all of our supporters is spent on education here in Annandale, in the inner cities of the United States, in the prisons, and in places abroad that need our help. You have every reason to be proud of this college and to support it in this particular year, which is unprecedented in its history. The college faltered during the Depression, and the answer to that was to merge with Columbia. The college was buffeted by progressive government after the Second World War with the GI Bill, but then ran into trouble as the 50s wore on. But the college is a survivor and hardened by the realities of dealing with practical limitations. Being rich is not the only route to excellence. We have achieved excellence through the quality of our faculty, and last but not least, the quality of our student body. I think Casey mentioned it, that the class of 2020 is exceptional. An exceptional class. When the pandemic hit, many of them stayed here because we allowed them to stay. We have many students from abroad and from places in the country where it would have been inappropriate for them to go home. And they behaved in an exemplary fashion. They wore masks, they helped their neighbors, they participated in online civic engagement. And so they were the best of Bard. And many of them were seniors, and we will honor them this afternoon at commencement. I want to thank the Alumni Association, the alumni trustees, and Casey for the leadership of the alumni. And I want also to recognize, as we often do, those who will be celebrating their reunion classes. This is not a conventional institution, as many of you know, and Bard students over many generations have not been necessarily group joiners, but we do talk about the traditional alumni sensibility. And I hope over the years we develop more of a sense of camaraderie and a sense of common purpose. I recently looked at an alumni magazine of a competitor institution, something one has to do, which is to read the competition based on the admissions overlap. I won't name the institution, but one after another, when you look at their list of board of trustees, they're exclusively alumni. They're alumni governed and they're alumni funded. We never have been quite that. But there is a tremendous amount of loyalty out there to the college for which we are enormously grateful. And so we recognize all alumni, but we actually have active alumni from the class of 1970, or at their 50th reunion, and from 1995 for the 25th reunion. Last but not least, you should know that next year, in 2021, we will invite all members of the class of 2020 to participate in commencement if they want to, bringing their families and friends, as they would have been able to. They can even go to the tent party the night before commencement. And if they don't want to do that, they can come in 2022 or 2023. So the next commencements that overlap with their undergraduate time here will be open to them so that they're not deprived completely of a real-life, real-time commencement. This is a joyous time. It's a time to remember what we miss and to learn from that experience, to return to a normal that is better than the one we left, particularly here at Bard. And I'm unbelievably proud of the cooperation the faculty and staff have provided the college in reopening. Classes will begin at the brink of September, and I'm deeply heartened and the faculty and my fellow administrators who've organized this have done a superlative job under very trying circumstances. So this should be a moment of pride and celebration, and there's no better way to do that than to honor the distinguished alumni who have earned the awards this year. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to Brandon Weber. Where is he? He's sitting in a bishop's chair. Just in case you want to know why these things are here, we decided we would diversify the visuals. So these are two chairs from the chapel. Many of you may not have ever remembered them. Chapel attendance is not the first thing one thinks of when one thinks of Bard, but there is a chapel, and there are services there, and there are concerts there, and events there. And deep in the altar are these chairs. They're quite old. The one that Brandon is sitting in is the bishop's chair. I think the last time a bishop officiated at a service in the chapel was quite a long time ago. So I'm not sure, and modern bishops are reluctant to indulge in such imperial splendor. But since Brandon is not a bishop, he's entitled to sit in the chair, which is quite uncomfortable, I'm afraid. And this chair was for the warden of the college. That's the title we gave the people who ran it, the individuals who ran it, all of them priests. And those are both in the back of the altar. And we thought we'd bring them out just to give you a visual reminder of our history and the places that we feature during commencement, and to link the past to the present. So, Brandon Weber.
Thank you, Leon. Well, I was smiling. I'm certainly not worthy of that chair, but I'll try to get through this awards ceremony without falling down, and it's the best I can do for you today. We'll now begin the presentation of awards. I'll draw your attention to the book in front of you if you're here in person that has all the citations you'll hear today, and they're also available online. So I now call upon Elizabeth Eli, class of 1965 and trustee of the college, and the Irma Brandeis Professor of Romance, Literature, and Culture, Karen Sullivan, to introduce the recipient of the Bard Medal.
I have the honor of introducing Barbara Grossman, class of 1973, who will receive the Bard Medal, the Bard College Alumni Association's highest award.
Barbara Grossman, with her keen mind and quick wit, left a lasting impression on her teachers and fellow students during her undergraduate years at Bard. The awards she received remain testaments to her exceptional achievements: the John Bard Scholarship, Wilton Moore Lockwood Prize for Creative Writing, and the William J. Lockwood Prize for contributions to the general welfare of the college. After Bard, Grossman decided to focus on writing and attended the celebrated Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa, where she met her future husband, Michael Gross. 2 years later, Master of Fine Arts in hand, she found a job as editorial assistant at the Alfred K. Knopf in New York. She moved up through the ranks in a difficult profession, that of being an editor and a publisher. Although often maligned by authors and readers, both roles have been vital to the development of literature and the dissemination of knowledge in our society. From Knopf, she moved on to Harper & Row, Simon & Schuster, Crown, and then Charles Scribner & Sons. At the summit of her profession, she was named publisher at Viking Penguin, a company, she said, with an incredibly rich, wide, deep list and enormous inventory. Her directness and sincerity must have been bracing to the offers she welcomed, ranging from Jacqueline Mitchell, whose best-selling novel, The Deep End of the Ocean, was the first ever pick for Oprah Winfrey Book Club, to Alan Wolfe, who penned One Nation After All, an insightful study of how America defines middle class and their place in it. By the time she retired, Barbara had become a member of a small but pioneering group of women in high-ranking positions in publishing. In her recollection, in the May 2015 Bard Free Press, was Bard cooler in the 70s, Barbara describes how activism accompanied being a student. We marched nearly every spring in DC and Poughkeepsie and Kingston against the war. We harbored draft dodgers and enrolled Vietnam vets who extinguished any doubts we had about the real cost of that war. But in addition to being mostly hippies, we read like demons and spent inordinate amount of time with our teachers, demanding attention that was almost always freely and graciously given. Then, as now, Bard valued its core assets, teachers. The one big difference between Bard, past and present, she says, is our public reputation as an important college with outsized ambition, a world-class faculty, and extraordinary creative entrepreneurial energy. Since her retirement, Barbara has devoted herself to what she modestly refers to as volunteer work, which has included chairing the board of the independent Berkeley Carroll School. She is an active member of her synagogue, Congregation Beth Elohim in Brooklyn, served on the board and leading a capital campaign. She has long been a trustee of the college. Her clarity and keen judgment are assets that have been immeasurable value to Bard, and we are honored by the faith she has shown in her alma mater. We trust that her 3 children, Max, Gilda, 16, Willa, Gross, 08, will carry her commitment and wisdom into the future.
So for those of you who have never been or never seen the ceremony, there is a diploma, which we give as a matter of habit, and a medal, which looks like this, and which can be worn, preferably when you're just in the family. Congratulations, Barbara, and thank you.
Thank you. A lot of parts here. I entered Bard College in the fall of 1969, and my dear friend Blair reminds me that festooned across the roof of the old gym was a banner that read, "It's great, but it's not the old Bard." Well, it was great, and over for the last 50 years, Bard was defiantly not the old anything. That's been an astonishing journey. I'm very lucky to have played a small part. Here's to the road ahead, and thank you all.
Before we proceed, I do want to say to Barbara that the thing that is the highest compliment she could pay us is that she sent her offspring, who are also 2 of them, graduates of the college. And for that, that's the highest compliment I can think of. Brandon.
I now call upon Roland Augustine, trustee of the college, and Sven Anderson, associate professor of computer science, to introduce the recipient of the John and Samuel Bard Award in Medicine and Science.
I have the honor of introducing Juliet Morrison, class of 2003, who will receive the John and Samuel Bard Award in Medicine and Science, given to honor a scientist whose achievements demonstrate the breadth of concern and depth of commitment that characterize the pioneer physicians for whom the award is named.
No one who knew Juliet Morrison when she was a student at Bard is surprised that she became a successful and innovative scientist. Morrison came to Bard from Campion College, a Jesuit preparatory school in Kingston, Jamaica. At Campion, Morrison, whose mother worked 7 days a week to support the family, met students from very different backgrounds. She learned from them about opportunities she'd never considered, like the possibility of attending college in another country. When Morrison heard about Bard's distinguished scientist scholarship, she saw a path to studying in the United States. At Bard, biology professor John Ferguson was reviewing the scholarship applications. Morrison's contained a photo of her with Sean Connery. The two looked like the best of friends. The rest of the application was outstanding, and Ferguson enthusiastically recommended her for the scholarship. Months later, when Morrison arrived, Ferguson asked her how she had met the star. Morrison let out a hearty laugh and told him that Connor had been a cardboard cutout, revealing what Ferguson recalls as her rollicking sense of humor from the start of her years at Bard. Morrison's Bard education is also remembered by her first-year seminar professor, Peter Gadsby, who recollects animated discussions of Tristram Shandy among Morrison and her classmates. Morrison began doing biology research right away, and for her senior project, she conducted an ambitious experiment to clone a gene so that it could be expressed in E. coli bacteria. Morrison did more than science. She was an emergency medical technician. She was active in the international student organization known as ISO. In her senior year, she served as the Master of Ceremonies for the annual ISO production. Given how she introduced herself to Bard, perhaps it is not surprising that Morrison donned a pink wig and entertained 400 people as readily as she excelled in the lab. After graduating from Bard, Morrison immediately entered a PhD program in microbiology at Columbia University, where she began studying viruses. She discovered an enzyme that helps poliovirus and rhinovirus resist the host's immune responses, which could lead to potential drug development. She built on that foundation for her postdoctoral research at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, where she located two new mechanisms by which the dengue and yellow fever viruses evade the host's immune responses to enhance their own replication. Morrison continued her work at the University of Washington, where she used computational approaches to explore host reactions to infection with the influenza and dengue viruses. Morrison returned to Columbia in 2016 as associate research scientist at the Mailman School of Public Health, where she investigated the behavior of emerging and re-emerging viral pathogens using computational, virological, and immunological methods. In 2018, she moved to the University of California at Riverside as an assistant professor, where she is studying ways to target viral infections. It's hard to conceive of a more appropriate year in which to offer Juliet Morrison an award, nor an audience more appreciative of her work. Thank you.
So Juliet is virtual, so she can see the medal and the diploma, which we will send her, and we congratulate her.
Good morning, everyone, and congratulations to the class of 2020. Roland and Sven, thanks for that lovely introduction. I thank President Botstein, the Board of Governors of the Alumni Association, and the Board of Trustees for inviting me to receive this award. I am honored to receive this from an institution that I adore. I am proud to share a stage with such accomplished awardees. Our Bard education is priceless. A place to think. It sounds so simple, this motto, but it is anything but that. I learned to think critically at Bard. I met professors, staff, and students who had profound impacts on my life. Fun fact, I am not so good at geography, so I actually thought Bard College was in New York City when I applied from Jamaica, and I am so glad that I never took a real look at a map of the US before that, because my 4 years in Annandale-on-Hudson were a blast. There are so many positive memories I could share with you, but we don't have a week. So let me highlight a few. When I came to Bard, I was lucky enough to do research with Val Thompson via the Immediate Science Research Opportunity Program. And that was my beginning That was the beginning of my love affair with scientific research. I can never forget Gavin Jones at Domain Williams and myself lighting a plate of ether on fire in Peter Gadsby's freshman seminar to demonstrate why physicians no longer use ether as an anesthetic. I remember how Matt Deedy patiently walked me through parts of physics that I was struggling with. I remember how Melanie Nicholson used some of her own money to help me afford the trip to Mexico for her Spanish immersion course. I'll never forget how Ferg patiently edited my senior thesis and encouraged me to apply to the most competitive programs for graduate school. Other fond memories include cracking jokes with Hilton Weiss in chemistry lab and watching The Princess Bride for the first time with Val and Ferg and their kids. And I can't forget Jane Bryan, who is one of the most welcoming and supportive people I've ever met. And I am proud that she's also a fellow Bardian. So the level of access that I had to such amazing faculty and staff was the best part of my education. I would not be here. I would not be where I am today without this fantastic foundation. I left Bard more confident in my abilities, more comfortable with being my unique self, and more willing to fight for what I believe in. To the graduating class, please know that you are well prepared for the challenges that await you. I know that things seem bleak right now with COVID-19 and society's festering wounds, but with upheaval comes opportunities for change, and we desperately need change. And you will be the generation to make these necessary changes. Be kind to yourselves and support each other as you go forth, because no one can do it alone. But remember, you have a world-class education and the tools to think critically. That is a true privilege. That is powerful. You are powerful. You can and will achieve your goals, and you will change this world for the better. My sincerest congratulations to you, class of 2020. Thank you for listening.
I now call upon my classmate and friend and Bard College trustee, Mustafi Shah Mohammed, from the class of 1997, to join Ellen Driscoll, Professor of Studio Arts, in introducing tonight's recipient of the Charles Flint Kellogg Award in Arts and Letters.
I have the honor of introducing Xaviera Simmons, class of 2005, who will receive the Charles Flint Kellogg Award in Arts and Letters, given in recognition of significant contributions to the American artistic or literary heritage. Congratulations.
I met Xaviera when she was in her freshman year. I was her PC. That was also my second year in America, learning about the country. And I guess we sort of welcomed each other. I very fondly remember Xaviera for her interesting, engaging conversations, her contagious smile, and her wit, her kindness, and really extraordinary empathy for others. She had something very deep in her personality, and you can tell she's somebody special. She embodies the spirit of Bard. I'm really honored to be here and read her citation that was prepared by her senior advisor, Anne Mee Lee. Here it goes. Even before I became her senior project advisor, I thought Xaviera Simmons were more worldly and mature than most Bard students. She had taken time off and returned to Bard with focus and a determination to learn as much as possible. She held several jobs to support herself while carrying a full course load. She was an engaged photographer who understood the medium's possibilities and limitations. She also DJ'd, loved film and performance, and was politically and socially engaged. So I was not surprised that she became a multidisciplinary artist. Xaviera received her BA after spending 2 years on a pilgrimage retracing the transatlantic slave trade with Buddhist monks. She completed the Whitney Museum's independent study program in studio art while simultaneously enrolled in a 2-year actor training at the Maggie Flanagan Studio. Her sweeping body of work centers on photography and includes performance, choreography, video, sound, and sculpture. Her interdisciplinary practice is rooted in shifting definitions of landscape, character development, art, political and social histories, and the interconnected formal elements of the mediums in which she works. I was very proud when I saw her powerful installation, Super Unknown, Alive in Thee, in the 2010 MoMA PS1 Greater New York show. It was a wall-sized grid of photographs appropriated from news sources of boatloads of migrants in the open ocean. The work engages with the devastating content of the images, but also reveals their function as an archive. I was again thrilled when in 2016, I stumbled upon her impressive gold miner's mission to dwell on the tide line, a text-based sculptural work commissioned by the Museum of Modern Art for its Modern Window exhibition. Our own formidable Luc Sante, visiting professor of writing and photography, calls Xaviera a benevolent magician, dazzling but tender, gnomic but inviting. He also knows that she is as much in love with words and music as she is with sights, so much so that she regularly arranges for those three forms to switch hats. Xaviera is currently a visiting lecturer in the Department of Art, Film, and Visual Studies at Harvard University. With a grant from the Art for Justice Fund, she is collaborating with Fair and Just Prosecution to invite lawyers to create audio, video, and narrative works focusing on efforts by reform-minded leaders to change our justice system. She's deeply caring of others, a characteristic that perhaps is what led to her political involvement. She's completing a commission for the Socrates Sculpture Park in Queens, New York, consisting of sculptural forms holding landscapes of language fragments culled from historical documents that continue to perpetuate social inequalities. Asked about the role of activism in her work, Xaviera has said she considers herself an engaged citizen who hopes her art can inspire changes. As Sante puts it, she's a historian who knows that things are as much and as little now as they have ever been, and that the proper approach to the past begins with the present moment.
So this is yours.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Again,
Thank
the
you.
diploma and the medal. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. I'm going to probably be slower than most, and I'm going to take a little extra time, but I won't take too much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Leon, for this award and for everyone at Bard. I really hold this award really close to my heart because I spent a lot of time trying to get to Bard. I worked many hours paying for the school and the education, and so this means a lot to me. The United States doesn't know people as daughters of sharecroppers or as descendants of American slavery. I mean, we know, but we don't really know. As in, there are descendants of slavery. As if there are descendants of slavery, then there are descendants of planters and plantation owners. As a collective, the people of the United States do not understand our own narrative. Our collective narrative doesn't really account for the white people, their children, and so on across the country who oppressed Black Americans for centuries till like right now. Like the shop owners who lynched and burned down whole Black towns, or the building owners who discriminated just an hour ago, or the long line of governors who advocated for racist policies, or the doctors who, because they didn't or don't like this or that Negro or Negroes, let this or that Negro die a slow, painful death when they could have saved the soul. Like what happened to Eric Dolphy in Berlin happened every day, all over the United States for centuries till this very day. Real Black freedom in the United States means a total restructure at every level of this society. Black freedom is reparations to the descendants of American slavery. Black freedom is the abolition of the police state as we know it, and a path towards a new vision of what it means to be American. Black freedom is collective uplift and the abolition of the construction of whiteness and race and its supremacy. It also means whiteness losing control of its systemic grip. Black freedom is a radical revisioning of resources whereby our collective material, spiritual, physical, and mental conditions are changed fundamentally across the spectrum of these United States. Black freedom is a path to wholeness after centuries of fracture. Black freedom is the United States actually repairing and making whole all of its Black citizens, especially those who descend from the American system of chattel slavery, whose ancestors toiled for centuries and those who have come from after emancipation. Black freedom means all structures in the United States transformed. BARD is forming the minds of artists, curators, scientists, musicians, and thinkers at every turn, many of whom are leading practitioners in their fields. What a testament to the character of BARD as an exceptional place to learn, create, and build community. Being a leader in so many contemporary fields means that it is beholden upon the community of Bard College in particular to accept the revolutionary abolitionist work that our young people have demanded we recognize. It is imperative that the community of Bard College embrace the current and historical radical abolitionist work happening right now. I want to thank Leon especially for guiding me during a time where I had no idea I would be surrounded by so many Bardians, but I definitely was inspired. Through all of the flaws that Bard may have, I have always been inspired by this place, and especially by the fortitude of its president. Thank you.
I now call Trustee Elizabeth Eli, class of 1965, and Jonathan Becker, Executive Vice President and Vice President of Academic Affairs and Director of the Center for Civic Engagement, to bring forward the first of today's two recipients of the John Dewey Award for Distinguished Public Service.
I have the honor of introducing Nicholas Acienzo, who will receive the John Dewey Award for Distinguished Public Service, which was established in 1990 to recognize extraordinary contributions by Bard alumni, alumnae, and others to the public sector or in the public interest.
Nick Acienzo has dedicated his life to serving the Red Hook, New York schools, the Hudson Valley, and the people across the United States. He is the definitive example of community-minded and engaged. Acienzo grew up in nearby Kingston and began teaching in the Red Hook Central School District after graduating from State University of New York at Albany, where he majored in mathematics and was named a SUNY Albany Hall of Fame athlete, in baseball. For the next 42 years, he taught mathematics, 7 years at the Linden Avenue Middle School, and then more than 3 decades at Red Hook High School, where he ran the AP Calculus and IBM mathematics program, and coached baseball and softball teams. He also worked at Dairy Queen, co-owning several franchises from 1979 to 2000. At the high school, Mr. A, as he's widely known to students, became one of the most admired members of the faculty and also was a leader of the Red Hook Faculty Association. He further solidified his commitment to the community when he created the Acienzo Family Foundation, AFF. Approaching retirement, he began pondering on how to use the assets of his Dairy Queen franchises and realized that his biggest assets were his students. He asked a handful of Red Hook High School students to help him create a foundation with a shared purpose and vision. These students became the AFF Board of Directors. The foundation was incorporated in 2015, the year before Acienzo retired. The Acienzo Family Foundation focused on poverty alleviation, educational opportunities for the underserved, and services for senior citizens. The programs it supports have ranged from Red Hook Harvest Backpack Program addressing food insecurity to Culture Connect, providing after-school activities for English language learners attending Red Hook schools. In response to COVID-19, the foundation played a central role in the development of Red Hook Responds, a community volunteer initiative that offers meals, assistance to senior citizens, and resources for local families during the pandemic. The foundation has also supported programs in which Bard students are active, including the Martin Luther King Day of Engagement activities and the annual middle and high school debate tournament at Bard. AFF was an early sponsor of Brothers at Bard, which runs a mentorship program for young men of color at Kingston High School, Acienzo's alma mater. Ever the educator, Acienzo has incorporated more than 40 of his former high school students into the foundation as AFF ambassadors, who play a central role in decision-making. We learn as much from our students as they from us, he says. Through ambassador grants, AFF has expanded its reach, assisting such endeavors as the Sunflower Bakery in Maryland, which provides employment opportunities to adults with learning differences, and Crossroads Family Center, a homeless shelter in East Boston. Teacher, coach, volunteer, and AFF founder, Acienzo is a model for young people and how a committed citizen can make a difference. As one colleague stated, he'll go out of his way to see a need and fulfill it.
So once again, here is the diploma and the medal that you have earned from the college. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan and Betsy, for those kind words. And good morning, all. Dr. Botstein, devoted trustees, distinguished members of the Bard community, and alumni and guests. Congratulations to the other honorees, and congratulations to the class of 2020. And a special shout out to Nicholas Fiorellini, who was our intern over these last 3 years. Good luck to you, Nick, and all of your classmates. I'd like to share a few lines of a poem that has resonated with me as an educator and as a nonprofit director over these years. The poem is entitled, "They Ask Me Why I Teach," by Glennis Harmon. The refrain at the beginning and at the end has within it a few phrases that I will read. The refrain. They ask me why I teach, and I reply, where could I find more pleasant and splendid company? There sits a statesman, there a doctor, a builder sits between them, and all about a gathering of farmers, merchants, teachers, laborers, men and women who work and vote and build and pray for a greater tomorrow. They ask me why I teach, and I reply, where could I find more splendid company? That poem speaks to the educator in all of us. If not by some certification, then by our standing in the community that we live and the influence we have. The public good is a continuous endeavor. We, as teachers, are guardians of that good, and with diminishing resources and obstacles about us, must be progressive stalwarts in its expansion. We possess two most powerful instruments. One is our voice, and one is our example. May we continue to teach in our own way, offering hope, inspiration, and promise in initiating substantive changes in the building of our communities, assisted by our splendid company. Thank you.
Now in my role as a member of the Board of Trustees, I call upon Wyatt Mason, Bard Writer in Residence, to join me to bring forward today's second recipient of the John Dewey Award for Distinguished Public Service.
I have the honor of introducing Matt Taibi, class of 1992, who will receive the John Dewey Award for Distinguished Public Service, which was established in 1990 to recognize extraordinary contributions by Bard alumni and others to the public sector or in the public interest.
Literature was born, Vladimir Nabokov tells us in one of his lectures, not the day when a boy crying "woof, woof" came running out of the Neanderthal Valley with a big gray wolf behind his heels. Literature was born on the day when a boy came crying "woof, woof," and there was no wolf behind him. Adapting Nabokov, we might say that journalism was born when a child cried "woof, woof," and the hungry creature was very much there. Modern journalism arose in the 17th century England. Although the printing press had licensed new intellectual freedoms 200 years earlier, the power it gave individuals to express themselves had come to rankle the powerful. Parliament, hoping to stymie journalistic criticism, passed the Ordinance for the Regulating of Printing in 1643, requiring printed materials to attain a government stamp. Without it, press owners could be jailed. This criminalization licensed a more virulent freedom. Give me the liberty to know, to utter, and to argue freely according to conscience, above all liberties, wrote John Milton in Areopagitica, a 1644 essay that crystallizes our ideas of free speech. When the English Bill of Rights of 1689 finally liberated printers from the threat of incarceration, liberal journals proliferated. Daniel Defoe's Review in 1704, Sir Richard Steele's Tatler in 1709, Steele and Joseph Addison's Spectator in 1711. Through each had its editorial character, all introduced a new format, the magazine. Magazines bred communities that shared frames of intellectual and experiential reference, a post-Enlightenment blossoming of the general interest. Public spaces opened where single voices could speak freely, to delight, inform, and protest. Matt Taibbi, who has been a mainstay at Rolling Stone for 2 decades, takes Miltonic imperatives as journalistic first principles. The son of a reporter father, Taibbi credits reading Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent at Bard as transformative. Its revelation, he told a Bard audience last fall, of the human kinds of censorship that go in the American news media. Taibbi's own work has been immune to self-censorship, his reporting imbued with a willingness to seek answers. Journalism, Taibbi has said, isn't brain surgery. It's just asking the simple questions that pop to mind when you're in a situation. Where did this happen? How do we know that? How do we know that's true? There's a whole generation of people in the press now who simply don't go through the process. Taibbi's work is fierce. His books, most recently Hate Inc., Why Today's Media Makes Us Despise One Another, are driven by the most uncommon public virtue, common sense. In another age, the radical pleasure his writing takes in poking and deflating the powerful would have seen him jailed. When journalist James Khashoggi was murdered, allegedly by agents of the Saudi Arabia government, or the President of the United States calls journalists enemies of the people, Taibbi's work dares to be dangerous. May his example call a new generation of truth-tellers to the public service of journalistic practice, warning us of the wolves in our midst.
So here again, we have the medal, if Matt is watching. This is the medal and the diploma, and we congratulate him and thank him.
Good morning, everyone, and congratulations to the class of 2020, to the other honorees, and thank you to Wyatt Mason for that amazing introduction, which was full of so many things about journalism that I never knew, especially about the history of the magazine. I'd like to also thank Dr. Botstein, the trustees, the Board of Governors, and the Alumni Association. I'm sorry I couldn't be up there today. My family and I have been in lockdown for 6 months, and we made the difficult decision to stay in isolation, even though we very much wanted to come up. When I first got to Bard, I was really not in any shape to think about anything I could do for the world. I had family problems. I was a hypochondriac. I was deeply depressed, really a mess. And by the time I left years later, I was pretty much the same person, but I at least had a good education. Before I got to Bard, I'd had teachers encourage me to write, but I'd often been chided for being silly or juvenile. And I got the idea that being a writer was this very serious job where the goal was to produce very profound things to say constantly. And I didn't feel like that was me because I didn't have anything to say yet. I was just a teenager. But when I got to Bard, and because of that, my interest in the profession was waning by the time I got to Bard, but I met a professor there named Benjamin Lafarge, who told me something that I'd never heard before, which was that the silly part of what I was trying to do was something that didn't have to be cut out at all. It was something that I needed to work on and embrace because he said I had an ear for it. And even though his expertise was poetry, he pushed me to read books, and he, over the years, gave me so many to read. And these were great books, but they were also humorous and absurdist. Books like The Red and the Black and Decline and Fall. And I spent a lot of my time at Bard trying to imitate all these great writers, not very successfully. But more than that, I was learning, I think, to think like they all thought and to look at the world in a certain way, with skepticism, but also with some sympathy and humor. And looking back, I think that's what a liberal arts education is really all about. It gives you a way to think about life. There's really no way, I think, to prepare young people for all the shocks that all of you out there are going to face about 10 minutes after you graduate. But you can give people a framework, not for how to think about each specific thing, but all things generally. And in that sense, I might say something unpopular here, which is that I never thought of journalism as a public service, or at least I don't think about it that way when I'm doing it. My conception of this job is that we just try to describe things that we see as accurately as we can. And if we do a good job, society will make better choices, whatever those might be. And that's the principle I've tried to follow, whether covering white-collar crime or police brutality or presidential elections or any subject at all. And there are a lot of people in the profession these days who think of this the other way. They try to think about important political changes that they want to see made, and they try to do the kind of work that they think will help bring about those changes. And I think both approaches can work, which is really the thing that I want to stress today, which is that there's more than one way to make a contribution in the world. I can't tell people in the audience what to do with their life, but I can say what the professors that I had at Bard taught me, which is that whatever you do in life, if you just focus on doing what you do well and doing it with passion and energy, even if your way of looking at things is very, very much not conventional, you'll be fine and you will someday make a contribution. Anyway, good luck to all of you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be receiving this, and thank you so much to a college that's meant so much to me over the years.
I now call upon Trustee James Von Klimper and Dina Mengestu, Professor of Written Arts and Director of the Written Arts Program, to present the recipient of the Mary McCarthy Award.
I have the honor of introducing Carolyn Forché, who will receive the Mary McCarthy Award given in recognition of engagement in the public sphere by an intellectual, artist, or writer.
So I'll read the citation. Carolyn Forché. When Carolyn Forché published her first collection of poems, Gathering the Tribes, it was evident to the growing chorus of admirers who greeted that book that this collection, winner of the Yale Series of Younger Poets competition, was the work of a youthful poet determined to do more than gaze admiringly into the world. For Forché, who coined the term poetry of witness, the transformation of sight into language, of seeing into words that could be carved into poems, was always more than a literary act spurred by a search for beauty. In Forché's hands, seeing is a moral and dangerous act, one that requires a close and considered gaze of the world alongside a type of moral imagination that can peer both into and beyond what stands before us. In hindsight, it seems almost inevitable that Forché, who at age of 27 set off for Central America to document the political violence occurring in El Salvador, would go on to become one of the country's greatest advocates for a poetic tradition of fierce engagement that has been present in one form or another for as long as poetry has been written. That engagement is one of the animating forces behind Forché's second book, The Country Between Us, and its iconic poem, The Colonel. Written in 1978 against a rising tide of state-sponsored violence, The Colonel transforms the reader and narrator into witnesses of a violence that resides adjacent to the ordinary, one that we can not only see but hear through the author's words. The opening line of that poem became the title of Forché's memoir, What You Have Heard Is True, which in 2019 was a finalist for the National Book Award. The judges, in their citation, noted that the book is a brilliant hybrid of poetry as reportage as memoir, an apt description that hints at the lifetime of engagement with language, politics, and literature that have shaped Forché's work. In her most recent collection, In the Lateness of the World, her first book of poetry in 17 years, Forché both returns to and expands her range of concerns, noting loss where there is loss, while also stitching together a seemingly fractured world buoyed by hope. As a poet, activist, translator, and professor, Forché has long been recognized as one of the most important voices in contemporary literature, whose numerous honors include the Wyndham Campbell Prize, Lannan Literary Award for Poetry, and Academy of American Poets Fellowship for Distinguished Poetic Achievement. That brief summation of awards, however, offers only a suggestion of the profound impact Forché has had on our cultural and political imagination. Over numerous collections of poems, anthologies, memoirs, and translations, Carolyn Forché's work has shown us what it means to imagine ourselves as more than just observers. Forché asks us, line by line, sentence by sentence, to see the troubled and difficult world before us. In doing so, we stand alongside her as readers and citizens, as witnesses asked to make society better.
So here once again is the diploma and the medal, which will go to Carolyn Forché. For those of you who may not know, Mary McCarthy was a member of the faculty here and lived on campus just across the way from this tent twice in her career. And she was a great fan and supporter of Bard. And so this award has a particular resonance, and as Dino knows, the importance of writing and the written arts in this college is second to none. And so we are very honored to have her receive this award. Congratulations.
President Leon Botstein, members of the Board of Trustees, faculty, staff, and the Board of Governors of the Alumni Association, and most especially graduating students. I'm deeply honored to be with you this morning. And I'm very grateful to Jamie von Klemper and to Dino Megestu for the remarkable tribute. I'm thrilled to be returning to Bard today, even remotely. I gave a reading at Bard in 2004, and I have very warm memories of that day. I want to congratulate the 437 students who will graduate today and the 161 students who will be awarded graduate degrees. You are, quite possibly, the most important generation in our history, and your challenges will be great. You are graduating in a state of emergency, in a moment of deep and convergent crises. Because I'm still actively teaching, I know that yours is a generation of serious and thoughtful people committed to saving a planet in peril and achieving the dreams of those who have long struggled for justice. It will not be easy for you, but you are not to be underestimated. Remember that we are not consumers. We are citizens of a republic. We are a people of conscience, infinitely obligated to each other across time and space. Our civil liberties and civil rights are your rightful inheritance and are commended to your guardianship. For generations into the future, men and women will express gratitude for your willingness to protect these principles. As citizens and as a member of the Party of Humanity, you have the potential to be noble of spirit. You may become the most important generation that has ever lived, given the challenges you have been asked to accept. Live accordingly. I know that you will find ways to keep yourself safe, healthy, active, and productive in your vocations. As your mission at Bard includes a commitment to the link between higher education and civic participation, I fervently hope that you will exercise your legal right to vote in the coming election, giving yourselves the time and space you need to make the changes you most fervently want. I say these things in the spirit of Mary McCarthy, for whom this award is named. She was a lifelong progressive who maintained her intellectual independence and discernment to the end. She was not afraid to take unpopular positions. Her dedication was to the discovery and proclamation of the truth. I'm deeply honored to receive this award in her name, and I thank you.
We'll now turn to the presentation of the Bardian Awards, which are the formalization of the Bard College Alumni Association's tradition of honoring longtime members of the Each awardee will receive an inscribed chair, example of which are here to my left. But before we do that, Leon's going to say a couple words.
Give Brandon time to put his microphone back in place. So these are the final awards that we give in these ceremonies. And I'm often asked after the ceremonies why we have these awards and for whom they're named and what they're really all about. So if you'll permit me, the Bard Medal, Barbara, which you got, is the highest award of the alumni and the college for service to the college. And it is, there are many trustees, I see David Traub, who have received, and some faculty and staff and neighbors. And it reflects a devotion to the importance of this institution. And I want once again to express my gratitude and the gratitude of all of us here at the college. The other awards, there's the Kellogg Arts Award, which has a complicated history. It was originally named for a person whose name would be now and was then even politically suspect. The donor of the award was a very generous alumnus and trustee, Flynn Kellogg. And he was a priest and also a professor at Dickinson College, and wrote one volume of what was projected to be an official institutional history of the NAACP. He was an American historian. And Bard changed his life, and he was very committed to it. And he was also, with his wife, Mary Margaret, someone who appreciated the arts. They had a second home in the Berkshire area. And so we persuaded him, he was very stubborn, to drop the inappropriate name and to replace his own family name to honor individuals in the arts. The Bard family needs no introduction. The Medicine Science Award is given in honor of John and Samuel Bard, who's about whom the truth needs to be told, that they were, they in the 18th century were slaveholders, and that is now a topic of discussion both for the College of Physicians and Surgeons and New York Hospital, both of which they founded. And so the Bard name is in those institutions. But they were George Washington's physicians. They were originally loyalists and then turned, not because they had more patients, but apparently it was a change of conscience to the revolutionary side. Their grandson, John Bard, who had no history with slavery and made his own money in life insurance and founded the college in honor of his son, who died, and built the chapel and St. John the Evangelist. So John Bard is really the reason we're all here, and that's why those awards carry his name. And finally, John Dewey, which is again another name change because of an inappropriate potential name. It's an award funded by Flynn Kellogg. John Dewey really represents the educational philosophy that came to dominate Bard in the 1930s, particularly when Columbia was the, if you will, the governing institution of Bard College. The Bardian Awards, which are an adjective from the name Bard, people still believe, by the way, that we were named after Shakespeare, which is a kind of a compliment, but it's still out there. But the Bardian Awards are given to members of the faculty and staff who have retired and to honor their many years of service. It's not automatic, but it is selected by the alumni and the faculty and the staff. I want to simply add my personal thanks to each of them, to Peggy Ahwesh for fantastic leadership and participation in the film program, and also tremendous enthusiasm for our partnership with Al-Quds on the West Bank and her commitment to that relationship and that program. Matthew Deedy has to have been the finest faculty citizen of recent memory. A fantastic teacher of physics. He sat on every committee imaginable. He was the baccalaureate speaker this year, and a fantastic person of the liberal arts. Taught the first year seminar, and maybe people don't realize that was also and is a wonderful musician and French horn player. Bonnie Marcus is part of a real Bard family. I think she's one of 4 or 5 or 6 members of her family who've come to Bard, gone to Bard, and she is a deeply loyal Bardian who served as Associate Director of Admissions for years and partnered with Mary Backlund in the real growth of the college's enrollment. A social worker, actually one of the first advisees of a person I'll mention in a moment, and loves the college and has been an integral part of its history, and I want to thank her for her service. And as you'll hear, Richard Teitelbaum, who passed away, one of the real pioneers in 20th century electronic music, and he really built the electronic music program here, and a fantastic composer, and also the custodian of the legacy of Henry Cowell, and a neighbor of ours on the other side of the river. So I want to thank all of them and for their service, and finally to tell the alumni and those watching that as we do this, we should remember two people whom they both knew very well. All these four people knew very well. Stuart Levine, longtime professor of psychology, Bonnie's advisor, who died in the past few months and is buried in the Bard Cemetery, and Luis Garcia Renars, the one of Joan Towers and mine dearest colleagues, fantastic musician, fantastic teacher, and taught here since the early 60s, and was the soul of really the love of music on this campus, who also is buried in the Bard Cemetery, who died several weeks ago. And so I want to remember them and their commitment to this college as we give the Bardian Awards. Brandon.
I invite Ben Coonley, Associate Professor of Film and Electronic Arts, to the podium with Peggy Ahwesh, the first of tonight's Bardian Award recipients.
Thank you. These remarks were prepared by Jackie Goss, and I'm reading them in her stead, but it's a great honor to present this citation to Peggy, who is both my teacher in the MFA program and my colleague for the last 10 years, and to whom I owe an enormous debt of gratitude. Peggy Ahwesh is one of the few artists who makes me feel really excited about making things every time I hear her talk or see her work. That's a precious thing. This observation by renowned author Maggie Nelson recounts the electric spark of an encounter with the art and teaching of Peggy Ahwesh, professor of film and electronic arts. It also suggests the imbrication of these two parts of Peggy's creative life. Over the course of nearly 4 decades, Peggy has crafted an impossibly diverse range of works, from the scruffy feminist punk Super 8mm films and a battered-than-batai adaptation of The Dead Man in the 1980s, to creative rewirings of the digital age's primary texts, to elegant multi-channel installations exploring the material idiosyncrasies and porousness of today's international borders. Made with more varied set of tools than almost any other artist working today, Peggy's films and artworks have been shown at prestigious venues, including the Museum of Modern Art and Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibitions, Institute of Contemporary Arts in London, and Centre Pompidou in Paris. She has received awards and fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, Creative Capital, and Herb Alpert Foundation, among many others. Possessed of a voracious intelligence, Peggy makes things that reveal abiding interests in literature, cultural theory, feminism, and all genres of filmmaking and music. This, in a spirit of working-class rebellion, which also fueled fellow Pittsburgher Andy Warhol, helped turn Peggy into a lover and hijacker of all genres of cinema. Horror, home movies, stag films, and animation all have places in her world, as does Pee Wee Herman, Lara Croft, Wilhelm Reich, Jacques Lacan, the Unabomber, Hélène Cixous, and the list goes on. In Peggy's work, ideas are dropped into new materials where they melt and recombine into smart and startling alloys. For 30 years, Peggy has incorporated this unique combination of intelligence and endless curiosity about new genres into her teaching in both the BA and MFA programs at Bard. Her final class at Bard was a course on vampires. A charismatic educator, Peggy could intimidate at first, but the students who gravitated to her found a devoted teacher and an inspiring mentor. One former student writes, "She always motivated me to find stuff that interested me, from snack wrappings to shop fronts, and to explore these things without any self-doubt or shame." Another states succinctly, "Peggy is Bard's sorceress and she-pirate." Poet Eileen Miles wrote about Peggy's directorial style towards actors. "She's not extracting performances, she's easing them up to what they know." The same can be said about Peggy's teaching. Her imprint is found on a generation of filmmakers working now. Although Peggy Ahwesh is retiring from teaching, she has put no brakes on her creative output. In recent years, she has worked with heat-sensitive photography, drone footage, and holograms. She'll continue to turn over, dust off, twist, and polish the familiar and forgotten, the despised and the scary, to show us something new.
Hi. Oh, thank you.
Peggy, I think you get a diploma.
Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Ben, and I want to thank Jackie, who couldn't be here with us today. Thanks to Leon Botstein, and I'd like to thank everyone in the staff and faculty, and especially give a shout out to the class of 2020. I just have a few remarks. Impossible to summarize my experience at Bard over the number of years I was here. I first came to Bard in 1990 as a visiting professor, and there was a striking moment, even the first semester I was here. It was in a very difficult moderation board that needed a special kind of diplomacy for us to get through it. And afterwards, Adolphus took me aside and said, "You fit Bard like a hand in glove." And he predicted I would remain at the college for a long time. And I thought to myself, oh, that's not going to happen. 3 years, maybe 5, was my prediction for myself. But the mad Lithuanian was right, and here I stand after 30 years of service to the college. My time at Bard has been extremely generative and has evolved constantly through the years. Not easy, demanding, a lot of work, but fulfilling in a way that true exertion feels. I could not have asked for more energized, forward-thinking, and committed colleagues in the arts and across the college. Over the years, these relationships have nurtured my art making, my intellectual growth, and my sense of belonging. The expectation to innovate and actively develop curriculum fit my appetite for research and experimentation. I taught in the MFA program for 15 years and was head of the film and video discipline. I taught a history of the documentary class in the Bard Prison Initiative. I did a virtual conference class with a colleague at Smolny in St. Petersburg. And most significantly, as Leon mentioned, I have had and will continue to have a long-term commitment to the Bard Al-Quds program in the West Bank. I've been involved in that since maybe 2009. But my bread and butter was the undergrad film program. And I want to express my gratitude and indebtedness to the colleagues that I worked with on a daily basis throughout the decade of the 1990s, when the film department was tiny. My 3 colleagues who are no longer with us, Adolphus, Peter, and John. I miss them, and I miss that time. It was very formative for me. Each, in their own way, helped me define myself as a Bard professor and showed me by their example how one lives the artist's life. And as the one who remains, I feel the privilege that I have the ability to carry on, but that privilege entails the obligation to honor them, and here today, for example, but also as time goes on, and the legacy of the film program continues to grow. I hope in some way that I have been a bridge from then to now for the younger faculty. I know I leave the film program in very good hands, and I look forward to being surprised and excited by the direction the program takes in the future. Working with so many productive and talented students was the best part of the job, and I do admit incredible pride over the significant number of former students who have stayed in the field, made contributions with significant work, and have been central to the contemporary discourses in film and also the other arts. What do I leave behind when I leave the college? In some ways, it's the little things that sting. I have a secret raspberry patch in the woods, if anybody would like the directions to it. I have my favorite locations for shooting class exercises along the river and in the cemeteries in Red Hook and often as far away as Catterskill Falls. I will have tons of obsolete equipment in various closets in Avery, and I recommend that it doesn't get thrown out because you never know. That might come in handy, and I rarely recommend throwing anything out. But what do I take with me when I leave the college? At this baffling and challenging historic moment, I take with me my Bard training to rely on into the future and to help me move forward. It's also the qualities that the current faculty will need to work through this next school year. They are trust in community, creative problem solving, open dialogue, and optimism about the job that is to be done. Thank you.
I now have the pleasure to invite my advisor, Ethan Block, Professor of Mathematics, to join me at the podium to introduce Matthew Deedy, our second Bardian Award recipient.
With retirement comes thoughts of a professional legacy, which for professors at a college such as Bard is not a measurable accomplishment, but is, hopefully, an impact upon generations of students. Physics professor Matthew Deedy has indeed inspired decades of both science majors and those non-science students lucky enough to have taken courses with him. But he also, quite rarely for professors who do not become administrators, has the legacy of a broad and lasting impact upon his college as a whole. A nuclear physicist with a PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Matthew commenced his service to Bard the minute he set foot on campus in 1987, immediately becoming the central person in the physics program and subsequently serving as program chair for decades. Even more unusual, after one semester at Bard, he took over as chair of the Division of Science, Mathematics, and Computing, serving a record-setting 10 semesters. Beyond physics, he taught courses in mathematics, computer science, chemistry, and biology. He regularly taught first-year seminar and was its co-director. He taught citizen science. He set longevity records leading the Bard chapter of the American Association of University Professors, the faculty collective Bardian unit. And the list goes on. No other regular faculty member at Bard in the past 3 decades has made anywhere near Matthew's contribution to the functioning and well-being of the institution. Thanks to both his remarkable classroom skills and the broad reach of his teaching throughout the college, it came as no surprise when Matthew was named the inaugural recipient of the Michel Dominy Award for Teaching Excellence. In everything he does, Matthew draws upon character traits that trace back to his childhood as a middle child of a large Midwestern Irish Catholic family, where no one ever got seconds at a meal, and argumentativeness was not an aspiration. He solves problems pragmatically, without ideology or ego. He supports even those with whom he disagrees. He strives for peace among colleagues. He consistently takes on more than his fair share of work, and he never complains. Matthew is the rare faculty member who is admired by and able to work with virtually all of his fellow faculty. Beyond working hard for the college, Matthew has wide interests, especially music. Though as a child of the Sputnik era, he was steered away from music and towards science when his talent for the latter became apparent. A fixture at Bard musical events, he is the rare non-musician who has brought an obscure composition to the attention of President Leon Botstein, renowned expert of neglected classical music. Many retiring faculty members, about to be replaced by younger colleagues, like to think they are in some way irreplaceable. The sweet irony of Matthew's retirement is that, due to his genuine humility and innate tendency to place the good of his colleagues and the college above his own, he is the last of us to think that he is irreplaceable, and he is one of the very few of us who indeed can never be replaced. And now, George Rose, Bard class of '63, is coming to us remotely with some remarks.
It's hard to add anything after what Ethan just said.
but by special dispensation, I've been given a few moments to add my 2 cents. I met Matt in 1999 in the kickoff organizational meeting for the Bard Science Initiative. That meeting had representatives from an external advisory committee and a few Bard professors, including Matt. Leon being Leon, the external advisory committee included a Nobel laureate, a National Medal of Science winner, a future breakthrough prize winner, among others. And actually, it also included a token Bard alumnus, and that was me. And that's how I know. Pretty hard to be a standout in that kind of company, but Matt was a standout, and I've followed him ever since. He is one of these people who had the option of choosing a research career or a teaching career, and it's clear that he chose the teaching career. He graduated in 1981 from MIT with his PhD in inelastic electron scattering, and did publish a number of papers on his research topic in top flight physics journals. But immediately after graduating, he went to a small liberal arts college, Mount Holyoke, and then 6 years later moved to Bard, and he's been at Bard ever since. He's a polymath. He's an authentic polymath with many accomplishments, but above all, he's a teacher. And what does he teach? Ethan gave a very nice summary. The great Leo Szilard was asked once to write his own version of the 10 Commandments. And here's Zilard's commandment number 1. Recognize the relationships between things and the laws which govern men's actions so that you may know what you are doing. And that, in a nutshell, is what Matt had to teach. His influence on students is long-lasting, undoubtedly lifelong. I know at least a couple students quite well who have had him as a professor. And I'll tell you, one of them who I do know well is Min Shin, who graduated from Bard 6 years ago. Then she went on to Washington University to take a PhD in a world-class lab in biophysics. She just finished her degree. She's now Dr. Shin, and she sent me a copy of her thesis. And the thesis has an acknowledgement section in it, of course. And in the acknowledgement at WashU, she acknowledges Matt by saying, I thank Matt for a lesson that it is never too late to ask and find out what I had missed. Matt sticks with students forever. So I wanted to do an inventory of Matt's teaching. And in fact, I did. Ethan mentioned the full spectrum of it. Let me tell you it in slightly greater detail. He's taught 30 different physics courses. They range from the introduction to physics, to quantum mechanics, general relativity, stat mech. He's taught 9 different math courses that range from calculus to differentiable manifolds, 10 special topics courses like the physical context of life, philosophy of time, 5 different first-year seminar courses like what is freedom, self and society, and the liberal arts, 3 citizen science courses. He's also taught in the lifelong learning program. Matt is absolutely surreal, and he's my hero. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Ethan. It takes my breath away. If I were to list all the people I want to thank, I'd be here for a very long time. So like a good science teacher, I'm going to just highlight examples from all of them and just by first name at that and hope that that takes care of it. As I told you, I came to Bard from a research career and wanted to teach, even that's really what I wanted to focus on. And at Bard, I found my ideal home, and I've been thankful for that ever since. When I got here, there were science colleagues who I worked with right away who taught me how to be a great teacher. Simi, Hilton, Kim, Ferg, Bill, Ethan, who you've met. It was just a great group to work with right away. And soon we brought in more people who helped us expand the program to really include lots of different perspectives. So first there was Mike and Dan and Mark. And then after that, we've got Felicia and Brooke. We've got Lauren and John. We've got Sarah and Kristen. Sven, Bob, Becky. I know I'm forgetting some. Emily and Chris. So many people that I loved working with and loved learning from and helping to help our students. But then the other great thing about Bard, and more so than any place I'm familiar with, is the ability to work with people across the campus, which I've been able to do and learn from all the way. My writing friends, Susan and Phil, my literature gurus, Eric and Marina and Karen and Deirdre, in the social studies, Brad and Greg and Rob were wonderful to me. And in the arts, Jean and Kyle really expanded my perspectives enormously. So I really want to thank all of them for that. Of course, we don't do it alone. We've got wonderful trustees and others who support the college in numerous ways. David and Ruth, Felicitas, two that come to mind. Leon sets this high intellectual bar that we all have to push towards. And it goes across campus from Amy and Anne-Marie and Peter and Ludlow to Alan and Klein to the horticulture crew and the B&G crews. These are all people who give of themselves enormously, even though they're stretched very thin, because we never have enough money and we never have all the resources we would like, but people just want to help you get the job done. And what it means is they've allowed faculty like me to be able to create new programs to teach our students to find ways of reaching them. The two biggest changes I've noticed in my time at Bard were first, the increase in satellite programs, both overseas and things like the Bard high schools and so on. And the other is the ever increasing sophistication and ambition of our faculty in terms of their own professional careers. And those have both been extraordinarily great aspects of Bard that have enriched our experience for us, for our students. But I always want to urge people to never lose sight of what our central mission is. Whatever it is you're doing, whatever programs you're involved in, it all should come back, as Peggy said, to the undergraduate program. How do we help our students do things they didn't think they could do and learn things that they didn't think they could learn? That's always what we should be centrally focused on. My father passed away before he could visit me at Bard, but he did finally come to understand it. He had never been in favor of my choice of career. And he said to me late in his life, you know, I've been wrong. You were always the happiest of my kids because you loved what you did so much. And that's been true for all those 30 years, 33 years at Bard. 15 of those years, I had the company of the great campus dog Beta. And the last 15 years and counting, I've had my ideal, helpful, supportive, tolerant wife, Mary, who's helped me with that. I just want to thank everybody who's touched my life, and I will carry with them, for giving me the most satisfying life I could ever ask for. And in response to Leon talking before, this is not the last time you'll see me at Bard. I am Bard for life, and I look forward to more interactions with all of you. Thank you so much.
I now call upon Janet Stetson, class of 1981 and Director of Graduate Admissions, to present our next Bardian Award to Bonnie Marcus, class of 1971.
Many of us are familiar with the affectionate term Bard family. For Bonnie Marcus, this expression is altogether fitting. Her Annandale saga took root at age 5 when she visited her sister, Laurel Marcus Phillips, class of 57, on campus. During her childhood, Bonnie remembers attending a Blythewood auction at which her family purchased a set of blue and white plates they still own. Laurel married Roger Phillips, class of 53, whose iconic sculpture, 3 discs in a rectangle, is installed here on campus. Over the years, many members of Bonnie's family came to study at Bard. That 2 of her nephews, a grandniece, and 2 cousins are counted in the ranks of Bard alumni is a great source of pride to Bonnie. In 1967, Bonnie reappeared in Annandale-on-Hudson as an undergraduate. Her proclivity for engaging others in community building was, and remains, a hallmark of her character. She became Bard's first female student body president, spearheading the inauguration of the college's coeducational residences. She was instrumental in helping to establish the film program as part of a student initiative. A psychology major, she submitted a feminist senior project on sex role stereotypes. Her advisor, Stuart Levine, said her work was, quote, well ahead of her time and done with a diligence and rare commitment. Her familial ties to the institution expanded when Remer Klein, the college's 13th president, officiated over her marriage to her first husband, Ken Daly, class of 71. Hardwired to be an advocate for the underrepresented, Bonnie went on to receive her master's degree from the Hunter College School of Social Work and was clinical director of Putnam Northern Westchester Women's Resource Center for the next 7 years. She took her valuable experience working with youth back to Bard in 1986, becoming Senior Associate Director in the Office of Admission. Bonnie and Director of Admission Mary Backlund formed a fast friendship. Their shared collaborative natures and passion for the college and its mission earned Bard a prominent reputation in the admissions community. Bonnie had a compass the rest of us relied upon. When she noticed nuanced inconsistencies during an application review, she'd declare, there's a story here, and she began to dig for the truth. She discovered quite a few diamonds in the rough. Backlund recalls, she could be bold, even loud, in defense of a candidate, but she was always fair and inclusive. During an admission event in the 1990s, Bonnie met her current husband, Ted O'Neill, then Dean of Admission at the University of Chicago, now Senior Admissions Advisor at Bard College, Berlin. Bonnie's talent for building relationships with and between high school counselors, college colleagues, and applicants matches her commitment to President Leon Botstein's progressive ideas. She led by example and trained staff to appreciate the necessity of keeping an open mind. Few have been more steadfast in their work for this college. As she puts it, Bard is a place in which I truly believe, and I am proud to be part of the history of its mission. We look forward to seeing Bonnie on campus yet again.
Thank you, Leon, Board of Trustees, Casey, Board of Governors, graduates, and Janet. Unfortunately, I didn't read Janet's citation before today, and I'm afraid I'm going to repeat some of the things she said, so you can have the opportunity of catching up on some of the same things. My connection to Bard has been almost lifelong, going on 65 years. As Janet mentioned, I come from a Bard family. My oldest sister, Laurel Marcus Phillips, and her husband, Roger Phillips, the sculptor of the Red Circle sculpture outside of the Student Center. My two nephews, Matt Phillips and David Phillips, and my great niece, Susanna Matthews, a graduate of the Bard High School, Early College Manhattan, and Bard Annandale. We all deeply value our Bard education and experience. I was 5 years old when we took my big sister Laurel to college. I remember spending a weekend with her, sleeping in South Hall, a residence I lived in my junior and senior years. I loved hanging out in the coffee shop, which was in Hageman at the time, with her friends. I do remember the auction in Blythewood, selling items from the mansion. And I remember that her graduation at the end of June 1957 was stiflingly hot. When it came time for me to search for a college, I visited a number of campuses, but ultimately applied to Bard early decision and was admitted. Entering Bard in 1967 was an exciting time to be a college student. The drinking age was 18, and I spent many a night at Adolph's dancing, drinking a whiskey sour, and eating a Blitzburger. Shotgun by Junior Walker and Respect by Aretha Franklin were our favorite songs. The Beatles' album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, had just been released the May before I entered Bard. The Vietnam anti-war movement was growing in leaps and bounds. One semester, we rarely went to our classes since we were striking over the war. I remember hearing Timothy Leary speak from the back of Albee. Other important cultural figures at Bard during my time were Allen Ginsberg, Robert Motherwell, B.F. Skinner. I'm sure there were many more that I can't remember. I was on campus for the 2 drug raids while Larry Quinlan was sheriff of Dutchess County and G. Gordon Liddy, one of the convicted Watergate burglars, and Daddy G in one of Steely Dan's songs, was the prosecutor for Dutchess County, and even lived to see him many years later sipping scotch at the bar at the Black Swan in Tivoli. I just missed being arrested by one night after breaking up with my boyfriend and returning to Tewksbury. I was a psychology major, and Stuart Levine was my advisor and mentor. My senior project was a research project on sexual stereotypes, a radical topic at the time. For the many years Stuart was dean of the college, my project was on one of the top shelves of his office bookcase. The last time I was at Bard this past November, Stuart and I had a night reminiscing over pizza. I'm so glad we had that night. My first marriage, note first marriage, was to Kenneth Daly, another Bard graduate, and the wedding was officiated by Reamer Klein, the then president of Bard at Laurel & Rogers House. Returning to Bard to work in the admission office was a perfect fit for me after being the clinical director of a women's center in Putnam County and spending most of my days in a windowless office helping women sort out their lives. Working with Mary Backlund, Jane Bryan, Janet Stetson, who have become among my closest friends, as well as many other wonderful colleagues. It was more a mission than a job. Besides, it was a lot of fun. My job has enabled me to make close friends in Bard and the college counseling community and even find a husband. Though I have been reminded many times over the years that Leon didn't want to hire me. I was the old Bard. I do hope he's revised his opinion. So working at Bard allowed me to do so many different things on and off campus: international, domestic travel, presentations on a variety of topics, counseling, safe sex workshops, signing L&T classes and roommates, hiring committees. I remember interviewing David Schein before he was hired. So representing Bard has been immensely satisfying. I always had something new, interesting, and meaningful to talk about with students and counselors. Even after thousands of presentations, I always found my enthusiasm for Bard renewed as I spoke about the college with students and saw their eyes light up. The students I would meet were creative, independent thinkers, young people who wanted to make the world a better place. This has kept me positive and optimistic about our world, even in the face of a bleak political landscape. When I married Ted O'Neill 21 years ago, he was the dean of admission at the University of Chicago. We met in New York City representing our respective institutions. Leaving the Hudson Valley was very hard for me, as I think of the Hudson Valley as my home. But Ted was worth it, and I moved to Chicago and have been working from here for the past 20 years. Ultimately, we even managed to recruit Ted to work for Bard in Berlin. Has Bard changed? Of course. It is better in so many ways. The core has remained, but we have evolved and grown in wonderful ways under Leon's guidance. Bard's mission of a private college for the public good is even more important today as demagoguery and right-wing zealots try to take over and undermine our democracy and perpetuate systemic racism. I thank Bard for this honor, and I will always support the college, but now in a new way.
I now call upon Joan Tower, Asher B. Edelman Professor of the Arts, to join us in presenting the next Bardian Award to the late Richard Teitelbaum, which Professor Tower will accept on behalf of his wife, Hiroko Sakurazawa.
Hello there. I was in the music department with Richard Teitelbaum for 30 years, and he passed away this past April. He was an amazing musician with an immense curiosity for all kinds of music. He was involved with jazz, electronic music, and he was just a wonderful iconoclast and had a unique curiosity about everything. I will miss him. He was born in New York City and went to Haverford College, and then he graduated from Yale with a degree in theory and composition. And he moved to Germany, where he studied with the iconic composers Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, Georgi Ligeti, and Milton Babbitt, three very different composers. A Fulbright scholarship brought him to Italy, and there he met Frederick Chevsky and Alvin Curran, and they formed what was one of the first electronic music performing groups called Musica Electronica Viva in 1966. After that, he got involved with John Coltrane and Ornette Coleman in the free jazz world, and he was just an amazingly curious composer about all kinds of music and performing it also. I did some improvisation with him, which scared me greatly because I'm not an improviser. But he turned to me after, I think it was 4 wines, and said, "Joan, that was really good." Alvin Curran, one of his colleagues who he worked with and friends for a long time, said of him, "Richard was the fundamental air around the music, surrounding it with knowledge, humor, occasionally politically charged reminders, and never fearing to take, still never fearing to take over and wipe us all out with the whole history of electronic music." He had a formidable intellectual, historical brain also about the history of electronic music, which he portrayed to his students so well. He partnered with Robert Moog, who was the synthesizer inventor and who helped him use Moog synthesizers to turn human biological signals into brainwave music. Richard brought the first Moog synthesizer to Europe in 1967. He returned to the United States in 1970 and created the World Band, among the first intercultural improvisation groups consisting of master musicians from India, Japan, South Korea, the Middle East, and North America. He spent 1997 in Tokyo studying shakuhachi, which is a bamboo flute, with the renowned teacher Katsuya Yokoyama. Richard's digital piano system combined computerized, controlled, and human pianists, while his interactive multimedia opera, Golem and Zvi, supported by a Guggenheim Fellowship, explored Jewish mysticism. He also worked with Anthony Baxton and George Lewis, 2 other iconic figures in very different fields, And he presented his composed and improvised amalgamation of synthesized and natural instruments in his Concerto Grosso recorded with Braxton and Lewis. Before Bard, he taught at the California Institute of the Arts, the Art Institute of Chicago, and York University in Toronto. Three very, very different places. Joining the Bard faculty in 1988, Richard said that one of his major pleasures was collaboration with his students. Quote, "They often surprised me." He was admired for his intellect and quiet sense of humor. In his eclecticism, range of interests, and explorations of intercultural improvisation and composition, he brought exceptional depth to the music program. He was also involved with the graduate Milton Avery program, where he taught music and performance art. We will miss him. I will particularly miss him because he was a very individual, independent, and a person with a great deal of integrity.
Thank you for tuning in. Congratulations to all our awardees today. Your achievements are inspiring to Bardians around the world. To all alumni in Annandale and participating from afar, in solidarity and in health, I wish you my best. I hope you will feel inspired to support Bard and become involved in your college. Please join us for the commencement ceremony this afternoon at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time to celebrate the unstoppable class of 2020. Thank you again to everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Have a nice rest.